Hello Gold Coasters, my name's Anna Downs and I'm here to talk to you today about The Safe Place, which is my debut novel. I'd like to thank Gold Coast Libraries for hosting me today and for inviting me to do this virtual author encounter. Virtual book events are, wow, you know, they're surreal, but I think they're amazing. I hope I'm getting better at doing them now. I think the silver lining is that we all have that much more access to authors and to book chat and information. You know, when I was first starting to write, I would have killed for this level of access. I'm certainly benefiting from it. I tune into a lot of these kind of events, and I think it's amazing to hear people talk about how and why they wrote their books. So hopefully you enjoy this talk and you get something out of it. So I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about the story. So The Safe Place is, it's a psychological thriller. It's a mystery. It's certainly the discovery. It's a story about the discovery of a secret. It's suspenseful, but I would also like to think that it has a lot of depth in terms of character. And it's, you know, in a way, it's a sort of a coming of age story. It's also a family saga in a way. I like to think it's a mishmash of different genres. Interestingly, a Sydney bookseller said to me just recently that she thought that The Safe Place was, well, the way that she described it was if Leanne Moriarty and Christian White hooked up and had a baby, that's what it might end up looking like. So I said I'd steal that and I'd adopt it and use it. So the story follows Emily Proudman, and she's a struggling actress, and her life is pretty much falling apart around her ears in a rather catastrophic fashion. And she's kind of rescued from this mess by a very charismatic and handsome businessman. His name is Scott, and he's actually Emily's boss for the time being. She's temping for his business. And he offers her what seems at first to be the opportunity of a lifetime, a job working for and living with his family on their beautiful and remote property on the Midwest coast of France. And Emily's in such a state that she jumps at the chance. It's a no-brainer for her. So off she goes very happily, and she's flown there in a private jet, and the house itself is extraordinary and the family are wonderful and beautiful, and it just seems to be a dream come true. But of course, nothing is ever perfect. And what at first appears to be the best situation Emily could ever have stumbled across slowly unravels into something much more sinister. So yeah, if you like suspense, if you like Leanne Moriarty, but you also like dark thrillers and twists and turns, then hopefully this will be the book for you. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about my background and how I came to write the book, and then just afterwards I'll be answering a few reader questions. So I used to be an actress, a lot like Emily. And I studied drama for 3 years at Manchester in the UK, which is obviously where I was born and grew up. And then I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and I studied acting for 3 years. After which I worked professionally for 4 years, and I had quite a good run. I had jobs in television and in theatre. I did commercials. My longest running stage gig was in the West End, a production of The Dresser, directed by Sir Peter Hall. That was amazing. But I was also on EastEnders, and I did the rounds of the you know, detective shows and the hospital dramas. And I had a really good time, but the lifestyle is really difficult. It's very uncertain, and the income was unsteady, and it gave rise to a lot of anxiety in me. And yeah, it all came to a head, and I decided that probably the best thing to do was to give myself a bit of a break and to pursue something that maybe, you know, was a bit more of a hobby. It was like a kind of, you know, when people go traveling and they say they're going to find themselves. Well, that was pretty much what I did. And while I was traveling, I met my now husband. And I decided after a few months of doing a job in a ski season with him that I was not going to go back to London, and I was going to just follow the adventure wherever it may take me. And one of the places that these adventures took me is to a job working for and living with a family on their beautiful but remote property on the Midwest coast of France. And just like the fictional job in the safe place is for Emily, it was a bit of a dream come true. It was gorgeous and wonderful, and the family were fantastic, and absolutely nothing sinister happened to me while I was there. It was absolutely wonderful, as I say, but there were a few things about the house and about the experience and the isolation actually of being there that did, that really stuck with me. Years later, I found myself living in Australia, so my husband's Australian, and after all our travels we moved to his hometown on the Central Coast of New South Wales, and so I found myself living on the other side of the world from my friends and my family. We'd got married, and we had two beautiful and very healthy children. But 2 kids under 2 is very, very difficult, especially when the youngest of them never sleeps. So unfortunately, I ended up with some pretty chronic postnatal anxiety. And the way that I dealt with that was to try and find a creative outlet. So I knew I didn't want to go back to acting, but I just needed to create and do something for my own sanity. And so I thought, well, I might try my hand at writing and see if I'm any good at that. And so I wrote a line, and that turned into a scene, and that turned into a chapter. And then it kind of snowballed from there, and I got quite obsessed with it. And I read a lot of theory books and listened to podcasts and did workshops and stuff like that. And in the end, I ended up with a full manuscript. And the rest is kind of history, I guess. So I'm going to answer some reader questions in a moment. I'm just going to start by reading a small extract of the book. Now, I've done a few of these virtual events before, and I've done some readings that I tend to start at the beginning of the book. I'm going to start on page 81 here, which is somewhere in the middle, and it's the moment that Emily meets another important character in the book. Her name is Nina, and she is Scott's wife. So Emily spends a lot of time with Nina at the house. And this part comes just after Emily has arrived at the house for the first time, and she's looking around and she doesn't see anybody in the house at all. It all seems very empty and kind of eerily quiet. So she goes into, so on the property there are 2 houses. She goes into one of the houses to look around. And while she's kind of staring around, she suddenly realizes that there is a woman standing in the corner just watching her. And she is so surprised and shocked by this woman that she kind of jumps, and she knocks a side table, and a dish falls off and breaks, and she's mortified. So this is the point at which she's kind of flustered and scrabbling to pick up the pieces of the dish that she's dropped. Cradling bits of broken dish in her hands, Emily looked up and saw tanned legs and a white cotton dress, an impossibly small waist, and arms covered with a paint splatter of dark freckles. Bare shoulders flowed into a delicate caramel-coloured collarbones. A long neck, slender as a ballerina's, gave way to a sharp jaw and cut glass cheekbones, topped off with a crop of short blonde hair flipped over to one side like a wave. Emily stood up. The woman's face was pure Helen of Troy. A bud-like mouth opened over straight white teeth. Impossibly long lashes framed a pair of almond eyes. The woman stared back, conducting her own silent assessment. Just as the moment was becoming uncomfortable, she smiled. "So you must be Emily," she said. "Thank you so much for agreeing to start at such short notice. We really appreciate it." She moved towards Emily with her arms outstretched. "I'm Nina. It's wonderful to meet you." The hug came as a surprise, and Emily hesitated before returning it, uncertain how she should interpret the pressure around her shoulders, the unfamiliar fingers at her back. Then, from out of nowhere, she was overcome by a brief, wondrous falling sensation, as if Nina were pulling her over a precipice, a feeling that, as the hug dragged on, gave way to discomfort. Shards of porcelain dug into Emily's palms and strands of hair became caught in her mouth. And then it felt as though she were no longer being pulled, but pushed, as if Nina were pressing her whole weight into her, crushing her, gripping her like she was the only anchor in an endless sea. And somewhere, just underneath wafts of coconut shampoo and expensive candles, there was a smell, a strange and subtle stink, like a piece of meat left out in the sun too long, a sourness that seemed to linger on Emily's skin and in the fibres of her clothes, long after Nina pulled away. So I hope that piques your interest. I'm now going to answer a few reader questions. Just bear with me, I've got some notes, so I'll be kind of looking at them. So the first question is, what inspired you to write the book? So I think I've already explained that. The experience of working as a live-in housekeeper slash caretaker at a remote property on the west coast of France, that really inspired me. But also the feelings around being a new mother, you know, the chaos and the isolation and the constant need to do everything right, to get everything right and be perfect. That was very inspiring. Also, my really quite desperate need to find a creative outlet and be, you know, create scenes and be imaginative. So all of those things together inspired me to write the book. So question 2 is, who will enjoy reading it and what can they expect? So again, if you like Leanne Moriarty or Christian White or Ruth Ware, JP Pomari, I'd like to think there's a little bit of you know, Jojo Moyes in there. She's been a big inspiration to me in terms of Emily's voice and the journey that she goes on. But you can expect fully realised characters and a lot of suspense, atmosphere, and a kind of a sense of creeping menace. Tell us about your journey as a writer. Again, I think I've covered that. I will say that when I did start, you know, when I knew that I wanted to write, you know, at some point it became less a thing just for me that I did for pleasure, which is definitely where it started out. I was never intending to show it to anybody. It was just something that really made me happy. You know, like a lot of new mothers go to the gym, you know, or that they discover yoga. That was what writing was for me. It just really helped me function better and gave me a bit of brain space from myself and from my worries. But there was a point at which I decided to get serious. I think it was kind of curiosity at first to see whether or not what I was writing was actually any good. There was a need for sort of feedback. So I started sending off some of my writing. I kind of shaped some of my chapters into short stories and sent them off to short story competitions. And fortunately, you know, I got shortlisted for one, and then I got longlisted for another, and then I was actually published in a literary journal in the US. So, you know, those were kind of carrots that were dangled in front of me, and I was like, okay, well, this is good, and clearly I'm on the right track. I did some online courses, and I went to some workshops. I particularly in Sydney Writers Festival ran a few workshops in 2017 that I went to, and they were really key in inspiring me to actually finish the manuscript, power through, edit it, polish it, and then research the heck out of agents and publishers and decide what I was going to do with it. So at that point it kind of became a bit of a mission, really. I was really determined to finish it, but also, you know, I was really quite determined to find out how you get published. And here we are, which is very exciting. Another question is, how much of you and your experiences are in your stories and your characters? Well, a huge amount of my own experiences. You know, the character of Emily is very much inspired by my own personal experience as an actor. In order for the plot to work, she has to be very vulnerable and very needy at the beginning of the novel. You know, we really need to feel how desperate she is to belong and how much she wants to be a part of this family's life if we're going to believe that the choices that she makes. And certainly I've never felt quite so needy or as vulnerable as when I was in London trying to be an actor. So that to me made sense to start there and to use some of my experiences. But you know, the other characters, they're really not like me at all, but there are certain, you know, there's a lot of emotional resonance in where they've come from and how they react to certain things and the choices that they make. I felt like the story made quite a lot of specific demands on them as characters. You know, if I was going to take them on this journey, they had to be certain kinds of people, and they had to want to do certain kinds of things. So really then it was just a matter of imagining when I myself might have felt those things. And that's something that, you know, we were trained to do as actors. It's called emotional memory. You know, if you might have heard of Stanislavski and, you know, the Actors Studio in New York. It's all sort of part of that, you know, about using your own emotional experiences and physical experiences to recreate that in a character. So I guess, you know, I'm influenced, like the Safe Place was influenced by my own personal experiences, but also by my training as an actor and my, you know, my sort of natural ability to place myself quite easily in the mind of a fictional person. What advice do you have for budding writers? Read. I know that's really generic advice. Always read. I would say get online, watch these kinds of events, listen to authors, take in everything that you can. I mean, you don't have to act on all the advice given, and you shouldn't act on all the advice given, but you know, the more information that you can drink in and absorb, you know, the better equipped you're going to be to start. Read the theory books. There are some great ones out there. Stephen King's on writing. Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic is a wonderful book that really sort of talks about how you can live a creative life without being fearful. Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. If you can get your hands on, you know, books about plot and structure, there's a lot to be learned about craft and technique and how to actually build your novel piece by piece and hang it on an effective framework. So the, you know, the 3-act structure, and also if you can be aware of you know, how historically and traditionally stories are built. You know, there's a theory that there are only really 7 kinds of stories in the world, and we're all kind of rehashing them over and over again. But that's really interesting, I think, you know, just in terms of how story works. Another thing I would suggest to any budding writers, particularly those who have small children or who are kind of trying to be creative in chaotic environments, I think it's really worth investing in a really good pair of noise cancelling headphones. I'm just going to show you mine. They are excellent. They're really big and wonderful, and I play Harry Potter themed white noise through those. So I know that sounds weird. If you Google Harry Potter white noise, you'll be able to find them. But you know, with a pair of those, you can go to a cafe, you can work on public transport, you can work in soft play centres, you can work anywhere you need to, I think. And the white noise neurologically, I think, tends to boost productivity. And another thing I would suggest as well is connect with the writing community and connect with other authors. You know, social media is incredible for that, and the writing and reading community is full of really wonderful, warm and encouraging and generous people. Another question is, how has COVID affected your writing routines? Gosh, yes, COVID's affected everything, hasn't it? In terms of writing routines, my oldest child actually started kindy this year in January, and I was really looking forward to it. You know, my daughter was had just started preschool, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is my opportunity to actually get a real, you know, routine and not write in snatches anymore. And I had about maybe a month of that, of kind of having 4 full days between, you know, within school hours of writing, and that was just bliss. And then of course the pandemic kicked off, and my kids were home with me, and so again, you know, I was writing in snatches. I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning again to write. I was having to juggle homeschooling and all of that. Here in New South Wales, we've kind of come out the other side of it, and really, you know, fingers crossed we don't backslide. So yeah, my son is at school. My daughter goes to preschool 4 days a week, and that's when I work. My husband's a primary school teacher, so he works full time. And so it's getting better. It's getting better. And I think in a lot of ways, you know, social isolation and lockdown is quite good for writers. You know, we do tend to crave a lot of quiet time alone in our houses. So, you know, as long as the kids are at school, it's quite good. It sort of aids productivity. But yeah, if you are caring for somebody or people, you know, if you do have children, this you know, our current situation, I think is pretty difficult, and you just have to carve out working time wherever and however you possibly can. What do you most like doing when you're not writing or thinking about writing? That's a good question. Nobody's asked me that. What do I like doing? To be honest, just recently I haven't really been doing anything other than writing or thinking about writing. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I really love skiing and snowboarding, snow sports. So if I had the opportunity at the moment, I would be in the snow. I also really love diving. I love scuba diving, and travel of all kinds. You know, certainly before children, that was, you know, so. It was such a passion of mine. Any opportunity I got, I'd be trying to get away somewhere new and discover a different place. I sing a lot. I love to watch, you know, musicals and stuff, and I haven't seen a musical for quite some time, but I love to sing, and I sing a lot in the car, and I read all the time. I guess that's not really something unrelated to writing, but and I enjoy hanging out with my kids. You know, we go on a lot of bushwalks and we go to the beach a lot. Yeah. So another question is, how important are public libraries to you? Public libraries are extremely important to me. When my kids were really quite young, and you know, every day we sort of got up and I'm like, oh, what are we going to do today to make it fun? We always went to the library. We'd go to the library certainly once a week, if not twice a week. My children, like even now, my son, if I say we're going to the library, and unfortunately I haven't said that for a really long time because they've been closed due to COVID, but if I were to say to him we're going to the library, he goes, yes! He loves it. There's nothing that he likes more than books, which is wonderful for me, and there is nowhere that he feels more comfortable than in a library. So when he went to kindy for the first time, he discovered that there was a school library, and I think before he realized that, he was quite a little bit anxious, a little bit scared. As soon as he realized there was a library on site, he was like, oh, I'm fine, Mum, see ya, bye, I'm going to the library. For me as a child, I mean, that's how I grew up. We would always be in the library, and I still remember the thrill of being able to walk in and just pick any book I wanted, and order any book I wanted. You know, I remember my mum saying, is there anything that you really want to read? And we'd go and talk to the librarians, and they'd give us some recommendations, and we'd be able to order it, and it'd be there the next week or whatever. I used to play at being a librarian when I was a kid. I remember making the old school pieces of paper, the slips that were in the books, and the stamps. And of course, you know, libraries are real community spaces. Here on the Central Coast, we've got some wonderful spaces where, you know, author talks are held. and it's a real hub. I work a lot in our libraries. The library, my local library, has a study room in it, and so, you know, if there's ever a time when at home, you know, the kids are around and everybody's going crazy and I need to get out, that I'll pick up my laptop and I'll go to the library. So yeah, I could go on and on and on. Libraries are extremely important to me. Which other writers inspire you, and what are you reading at the moment? At the moment, I've just started a thriller called The Shadow Friend by Alex North. In America, I think it's called The Shadows. He wrote The Whisper Man. He's an excellent writer. His, I mean, there's kind of, it's definitely crime, it's thriller, but there's also sort of a horror element as well. But it's quite emotionally affecting as well. I remember The Whisper Man made me cry as well as, you know, kind of scared the wits out of me. I also really love, so I'll always quote Leanne Moriarty and David Nichols. I love David Nichols. I'm a huge fan of Christian White and JP Pomari and Chris Hammer and Jane Harper, Dervla McTiernan. I also really love Ruth Ware, but I read really widely, and I read a lot of different genres. So like, I'm a huge fan of Laini Taylor, who writes fantasy. Hannah Kent, I think, is extraordinary. Burial Rites remains to this day one of my favourite novels ever. Shirley Jackson, God, you know, what's the name of the book? We Have Always Lived in the Castle. That's just an incredible read. John Irving, I really love. Catherine Heine, who wrote Standard Deviation. Zadie Smith, Celeste Ng. I really loved Little Fires Everywhere. And I just read recently My Sister the Serial Killer by Lincoln Braithwaite, and that's phenomenal. Anyway, we could be here for hours and hours with me doing this, so I'll stop there. What's the next big project for Anna Downs? Well, the next big project is I'm writing a second novel at the moment. It doesn't have a title currently, but I am exploring parental fear and the dark web, tech and the internet. So the premise is that the story follows two women, and they are 3 years apart, so they're running on 2 different timelines. They also live on the other side of the world from each other. One's in the UK and one's in Australia. They're both raising teenage sons who have got themselves involved in the dark web. Now, one of these sons has developed a bit of an interest in mystery boxes ordered from the dark web. If you Google dark web mystery boxes, you can fall down a bit of a rabbit hole. And they were very popular in around 2017. And they were being ordered on the dark web, on marketplaces, purchased using Bitcoin. And they would arrive and they would have in them a lot of, you know, an assortment of very strange and sinister objects. So you might find flash drives, or a piece of rope, or a bloodied screwdriver, or a packet of what looks like drugs, or a burner phone. And there didn't seem to be much sense to them, but they were very, very odd and weird. And these YouTubers were making, you know, they were garnering quite a lot of interest, vlogging about them. So in the story, one of the teenage sons has got involved with that, and his mother, you know, goes ballistic when she finds out, and she takes away all his devices so he can no longer order them. But the mystery boxes keep coming, and they start to contain familiar items, so things from inside the family's house, etc, etc. So it starts to become very, very creepy and odd, and the family start to wonder, what on earth has their son unleashed upon them by trifling with the dark web. I'm still working on that elevator pitch, but hopefully you get an idea of the kind of thing that I'm writing. It should be a page turner, fingers crossed. It should be suspenseful, but hopefully I'll also do what I've done in The Safe Place and bring some very real characters to life. Okay, well, I think that's all from me. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to Gold Coast Libraries for hosting me. I'd love to hear from you. You know, you can stay in touch with me. It's so lovely to hear from readers, and I love to talk about books, as you can tell. So you can get in touch with me on my website, which is anna-downs.com. I'm on Twitter a lot. My handle is @whatanna_wrote. And I'm on Instagram a lot as well. My handle on that is @Anna_Downs_writer. So yeah, do get in touch. I really hope that you pick up The Safe Place. I hope that you enjoy it. And I hope that you join me for the next one as well. All right, take care of yourselves, keep reading, and I'll see you again. Thank you.